Here's a brief overview of the presidents of the Philippines from Ferdinand Marcos Sr. to the present, focusing on the economy, debt, peace and order, and public approval during their time in office. Ferdinand Marcos Sr., serving from 1965 to 1986, initially experienced economic growth, supported by heavy borrowing. However, his regime's later years were marked by cronyism, corruption, and economic mismanagement. Inflation and poverty increased, and growth stagnated. Under Marcos Sr., foreign debt skyrocketed from about $600 million in the late 1960s to $28 billion by 1986. This heavy borrowing led to long-term debt problems for the Philippines. Marcos declared martial law in 1972, citing threats of communist insurgency and rebellion. While crime and political unrest were suppressed, human rights abuses were rampant. Marcos remained popular in the early years, but his approval drastically declined by the end of his regime due to economic hardships and widespread repression. The 1986 People Power Revolution forced him into exile. Corazon Aquino, from 1986 to 1992, focused on restoring democracy and rebuilding institutions. The economy faced challenges due to political instability and natural disasters, but her administration initiated economic reforms to stabilize the situation. GDP growth averaged about 3.4% during her term. Aquino inherited a massive debt and worked to reschedule it. Debt servicing became a significant burden for the government. The government faced coup attempts and ongoing communist and Muslim insurgencies. Despite efforts for peace, insurgency remained a serious issue. Aquino was widely respected as a symbol of democracy, but her administration's economic and security challenges affected her popularity, which fluctuated during her presidency. Fidel V Ramos, from 1992 to 1998, is credited with steering the Philippines into a period of economic reform and growth. His administration liberalized key sectors, and the country achieved stable GDP growth, averaging around 5%. He was instrumental in improving infrastructure and inviting foreign investments. Ramos managed the country's debt situation prudently, promoting reforms that encouraged growth while keeping the debt under control. Ramos signed a peace agreement with the Moro National Liberation Front and addressed various insurgencies. His administration was generally peaceful, though small-scale conflicts persisted. Ramos was widely popular, particularly for his economic reforms and efforts toward peace. He left office with a relatively high approval rating. Joseph Estrada served as the President of the Philippines from 1998 to 2001. His administration faced significant economic challenges due to the Asian financial crisis. Estrada focused on poverty alleviation, but, his efforts were hampered by a slow economy. Growth averaged about 3% during his term. Debt levels remained stable, but unfortunately, economic growth was not sufficient to make significant progress. In terms of peace and order, Estrada declared an all-out war against the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, leading to renewed conflict in Mindanao. Initially, Estrada was quite popular, but his approval ratings plummeted due to corruption scandals. He was eventually ousted in 2001 after the Second EDSA revolution. Gloria Macapagal. Arroyo's administration, spanning from 2001 to 2010, witnessed notable economic growth. The GDP expanded by an average of 4.5%, thanks to fiscal reforms and strategic management that helped the country avoid the worst effects of the 2008 global financial crisis. However, inequality and poverty remained significant issues throughout her tenure. Under Arroyo's leadership, tax reforms like the expanded value-added tax, or EVAT, were implemented to boost government revenue and manage the national debt. While public debt remained high, fiscal discipline played a key role in reducing deficits. Arroyo's presidency was also marked by multiple coup attempts and insurgencies, particularly in the southern regions. Her administration did sign peace agreements with some rebel groups, but conflict in Mindanao continued to persist. Toward the end of her presidency, Arroyo faced low approval ratings. Corruption scandals, election-related controversies, and public dissatisfaction with poverty and inequality contributed to her declining popularity. Benigno Aquino III served as president from 2010 to 2016, a period characterized by significant economic growth. The average GDP growth rate was 6.2%, one of the highest in recent Philippine history. His administration's focus on transparency, good governance, and infrastructure development played a crucial role in this economic success. Aquino's administration maintained a stable debt-to-GDP ratio through fiscal discipline, keeping debt levels under control and significantly improving the country's credit rating. In terms of peace and order, Aquino made notable strides in peace talks with the MILF, culminating in the signing of the Bangsamoro Framework Agreement. However, incidents like the Mamasapano clash in 2015 negatively impacted public perception of his leadership in handling peace and security issues. Throughout most of his term, Aquino enjoyed relatively high approval ratings, bolstered by economic growth and anti-corruption efforts. Nonetheless, his popularity dipped following controversies such as the handling of the Mamasapano incident. Rodrigo Duterte's presidency, which lasted from 2016 to 2022, began with strong economic growth. However, the COVID-19 pandemic caused a severe contraction in 2020. Pre-pandemic growth averaged around 6%, driven by infrastructure development under the Build program and tax reforms. During the pandemic, Duterte's administration borrowed heavily, increasing the national debt to over 11 trillion pesos by 2022. Despite this, the debt was considered manageable before the pandemic struck. Duterte's war on drugs was a defining aspect of his presidency, leading to thousands of deaths in police operations and sparking both domestic and international criticism. Additionally, he declared martial law in Mindanao following the Marawi siege in 2017. Despite controversies surrounding human rights abuses and pandemic mismanagement, Duterte remained highly popular throughout his term. He left office with strong approval ratings, largely due to his populist appeal. Ferdinand Marcos Jr., who took office in 2022, has inherited an economy recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic. His administration focuses on agriculture, digitalization, and infrastructure to sustain growth. As of 2023, economic growth has been moderate compared to previous years. Marcos Jr. faces the challenge of high national debt, with the debt to GDP ratio around 60% due to the pandemic. His administration is concentrating on fiscal management to ensure sustainable growth while managing this debt burden. In terms of peace and order, Marcos Jr. has continued peace efforts in Mindanao and has taken a less aggressive stance on issues like the drug war compared to his predecessor. Nevertheless, peace and order remain concerns, particularly with ongoing insurgencies and localized conflicts. As of 2023, Marcos Jr. enjoys relatively high approval ratings. He benefits from his family's legacy among certain sectors and his focus on economic recovery. However, challenges such as inflation, governance, and political dynamics persist. If you like this video, please click the like button and subscribe to Always Mabel Canada. Click the bell icon to be notified every time we upload our latest video.